The Dark Side of Riches, written and published by Rich Audiobooks. Chapter 1. Drug Empires Masked as Healthcare. In the pristine halls of medical centers and behind pharmacy counters across America, a sinister transformation has been taking place. The very institutions designed to heal have become vessels for an underground drug empire that generates billions in illicit profits while destroying countless lives. This is not the tale of street corner dealers, but of men and women in white coats who have twisted their sacred oath into a license to deal. The story begins in the 1996 financiers when pharmaceutical companies launched aggressive marketing campaigns promoting opioids as a safe solution for chronic pain. Companies like Purdue Pharma knew the addictive potential of their products, but buried the evidence beneath layers of manipulated research and paid testimonials. Sales representatives courted doctors with lavish dinners, speaking fees, and luxury retreats, creating a network of medical professionals who would become unwitting, or in some cases willing, participants in a nationwide drug distribution scheme. As prescription rates soared, a new business model emerged: the pill mill. These operations masqueraded as pain management clinics but functioned as assembly lines for prescriptions. Patients would wait for hours in parking lots, paying cash for brief consultations that invariably ended with prescriptions for high-dose opioids. A single clinic could generate millions in revenue, with doctors seeing upwards of 60 patients per day. The prescriptions they wrote weren't just feeding individual addictions, they were supplying an entire secondary market of street sales. The pharmaceutical supply chain itself became compromised. Corrupt wholesalers developed sophisticated schemes to divert medications, often exploiting the complex web of regulations governing controlled substances. They created phantom pharmacies, falsified orders, and bribed officials to look the other way. Meanwhile, legitimate pharmacies found themselves transformed into fronts for criminal enterprises, with pharmacists filling obviously fraudulent prescriptions in exchange for a cut of the profits. Behind these operations, a sophisticated financial infrastructure emerged. Shell companies, offshore accounts, and elaborate money laundering operations helped transform pill profits into legitimate-looking assets. Medical billing fraud became an art form, with clinics charging insurance companies for unnecessary tests and procedures while pocketing millions in fraudulent claims. The very systems designed to prevent abuse were turned into tools for profit. The human cost of this transformation has been staggering. Communities across America have been ravaged by addiction, with former patients turned into unwitting customers of an illegal drug trade. The line between healthcare provider and drug dealer has blurred, creating a crisis of trust in medical institutions. Families have been torn apart, careers destroyed, and lives lost, all while generating immense wealth for those at the top of these pharmaceutical pyramids. Law enforcement efforts to combat these operations face numerous challenges. The criminals wear white coats instead of street clothes, and their weapons are prescription pads rather than firearms. They hide behind medical licenses and legitimate businesses, making prosecution complex and time-consuming. When cases do make it to court, they often reveal intricate networks of corruption involving doctors, pharmacists, clinic owners, and drug company executives, all working in concert to maintain their profitable enterprises. The transformation of healthcare into a front for drug dealing represents a particularly insidious form of corruption, one that exploits society's trust in medical professionals and our legitimate need for pain management. It demonstrates how easily systems designed to help can be perverted into mechanisms of harm, and how the pursuit of profit can corrupt even the most noble of professions. As healthcare continues to evolve, new opportunities for exploitation emerge, suggesting that this dark intersection of medicine and criminality will continue to adapt and persist. Chapter 2. Human Trafficking Hiding in Industries. Behind the pristine facades of luxury hotels, beneath the ordered rows of agricultural fields, and within the walls of suburban homes, lies one of humanity's darkest enterprises: human trafficking. This modern form of slavery has evolved to become deeply embedded within legitimate business operations, making it increasingly difficult to detect and dismantle. The hospitality industry serves as a prime example of how trafficking operations integrate seamlessly into everyday commerce. High-end hotels and motels, while providing legitimate accommodation services, can unknowingly, or sometimes knowingly, become venues for sex trafficking. Traffickers exploit the privacy afforded to guests and the traditional reluctance of hospitality staff to interfere with paying customers. Some establishments have even developed informal arrangements with trafficking networks, accepting regular payments to turn a blind eye to suspicious activities. Agricultural businesses present another stark reality of labor trafficking. Large farming operations often rely on complex networks of labor contractors and subcontractors, creating layers of deniability between the farm owners and the exploited workers. Traffickers pose as legitimate labor recruiters, promising decent wages and working conditions to vulnerable people, particularly undocumented immigrants. Once workers arrive, they face debt bondage, passport confiscation, and physical isolation, trapped in a cycle of exploitation while harvesting the food that reaches American dinner tables. The domestic work sector harbors some of the most isolated trafficking victims. Behind the doors of affluent neighborhoods, trafficking victims serve as housekeepers, nannies, and elder care workers. Their abuse is masked by cultural expectations around domestic work and the private nature of home employment. Traffickers often use diplomatic immunity, language barriers, and threats of deportation to maintain control over their victims, while presenting a respectable face to the community. Legitimate businesses unwittingly support trafficking through compromised supply chains. Major retailers and manufacturers often source materials and products through multiple layers of suppliers, making it difficult to verify labor conditions at every step. Industries such as fashion, electronics, and construction regularly encounter trafficking in their extended supply networks, particularly in regions with weak labor protections and limited oversight. The modeling and entertainment industry presents a sophisticated facade for trafficking operations. Fraudulent modeling agencies lure aspiring models with promises of glamorous careers, only to force them into sexual exploitation or debt bondage. These agencies maintain professional websites, attend industry events, and even secure legitimate modeling contracts to maintain their cover. The line between legitimate talent recruitment and trafficking becomes deliberately blurred. Massage parlors represent one of the most visible intersections of legitimate business and trafficking. Operating under the guise of therapeutic services, these establishments often form part of larger trafficking networks. They maintain business licenses, advertise openly, and operate in commercial districts while exploiting trafficked people behind closed doors. The normalization of these businesses in many communities makes it challenging for law enforcement to intervene effectively. Corporate complicity in trafficking often stems from complex incentive structures that prioritize profit over due diligence. Companies may avoid asking difficult questions about their labor sources or business partners, creating an environment of willful blindness. When trafficking is discovered, businesses often face minimal consequences, treating fines and settlements as operational costs rather than deterrents to future involvement. The prosecution of trafficking cases remains challenging due to the sophisticated integration of illegal activities within legitimate business structures. Victims face significant barriers to coming forward, including fear of retaliation, lack of documentation, and distrust of authorities. Meanwhile, trafficking operations continue to evolve, finding new ways to exploit legitimate business practices and regulatory gaps, making the task of identification and enforcement an ongoing challenge in our modern economy. Chapter 3. Scam Canes Dressed as Innovation. The cryptocurrency revolution promised a democratic financial future, but it created perfect conditions for sophisticated fraud on an unprecedented scale. What began as Bitcoin's genuine innovation spawned thousands of cryptocurrencies, many designed purely to separate investors from their money through elaborate technological deception. The mechanics of crypto scams often follow a predictable pattern, while masquerading as groundbreaking technology. Fraudsters create tokens with sophisticated-sounding white papers filled with technical jargon, promising revolutionary blockchain applications that will disrupt entire industries. They build sleek websites, fabricate development teams using stolen photos, and craft compelling narratives about how early investors will reap massive returns when the project moves. Celebrity endorsements and influencer marketing have become powerful weapons in the scammer's arsenal. Social media personalities with millions of followers promote tokens for undisclosed payments, creating artificial hype and FOMO among their audiences. When prices spike from this manufactured demand, the scammers and their promotional partners quietly sell their pre-mined tokens, leaving ordinary investors holding worthless digital assets. The initial coin offering ICO boom of 201-72018 demonstrated how easily blockchain technology could be weaponized for fraud. Thousands of projects raised billions of dollars by selling tokens for products that would never materialize. Many simply copied existing white papers, changed the project name, and launched aggressive marketing campaigns promising revolutionary technology. By the time investors realized they'd been deceived, the founders had disappeared with the funds. Modern crypto scams have evolved to exploit psychological vulnerabilities through sophisticated social engineering. Rug pulls create legitimate-looking projects with active social media presence and community engagement, slowly building trust before suddenly draining liquidity pools and abandoning the project. Honeypots trap investors with smart contracts that allow buying but prevent selling. Dump-and-dump schemes coordinate large groups through private messaging channels to artificially inflate prices before massive sell-offs. The regulatory vacuum surrounding cryptocurrency has created perfect conditions for these schemes to flourish. Operating across international borders through decentralized networks, scammers exploit jurisdictional gaps and the pseudo-anonymous nature of blockchain transactions. Even when authorities identify fraud, the irreversible nature of cryptocurrency transactions makes recovery of stolen funds nearly impossible. Traditional financial crimes have found new life in the crypto space. Money laundering through cryptocurrency exchanges, market manipulation through trading bots, and Ponzi schemes masked as high-yield investment programs have all adapted to blockchain technology. The complexity of the technology itself serves as camouflage, making it difficult for average investors to distinguish legitimate projects from elaborate frauds. What makes crypto scams particularly insidious is their ability to hide behind legitimate technological innovation. Real blockchain applications solving genuine problems exist alongside fraudulent projects copying their language and appearance. This mixture of legitimate and fraudulent activity creates confusion that scammers exploit, allowing them to operate in plain sight while claiming to be misunderstood innovators rather than criminals. The cryptocurrency industry's resistance to regulation, justified through ideological arguments about decentralization and financial freedom, has inadvertently protected fraudsters. While legitimate projects worry about regulatory compliance, scammers operate with impunity, knowing that the same anti-regulatory sentiment that powers crypto adoption also shields their criminal activities from scrutiny. Chapter 4. Casuists disgusted as energon. Behind the dazzling lights, endless buffets, and promises of instant wealth lies a carefully orchestrated system designed not just for gambling, but for washing dirty money clean. Casinos have long served as sophisticated financial laundromats, where illicit funds can be transformed into legitimate-looking winnings through a complex web of transactions. The process is deceptively simple. Criminals bring in tainted cash, exchange it for chips, play minimally or not at all, then cash out with funds that appear to come from gambling wins. High roller rooms serve as particularly effective venues for these operations, where millions can be processed in single sessions under the guise of wealthy players enjoying luxury amenities. These exclusive areas operate with heightened privacy and fewer questions, making them ideal for processing large sums of questionable origin. The relationship between organized crime and casinos dates back to Las Vegas's earliest days, when mob figures like Bugsy Siegel recognized the potential of gambling establishments to legitimize their criminal proceeds. While today's casinos operate under corporate ownership and strict regulations, the fundamental vulnerability to money laundering remains. Modern organized crime groups have simply adapted their methods, using sophisticated networks of players, employees, and financial instruments to move money through gaming establishments. Online gambling has created new opportunities for financial crime, operating in a regulatory gray zone that spans multiple jurisdictions. Digital casinos can be based offshore, making enforcement challenging and oversight minimal. Players can deposit funds through various payment methods, including cryptocurrencies, creating additional layers of anonymity. The rapid growth of mobile gambling apps has only accelerated this trend, with some platforms deliberately designed to facilitate questionable transactions. The casino industry's exploitation extends beyond money laundering to its core business model. Gaming floors are architecturally designed to disorient and entrap, with no windows or clocks to mark the passage of time. Slot machines employ sophisticated psychological triggers, using variable reward schedules that activate the same neural pathways as addictive drugs. The industry markets itself as entertainment, while employing data analytics to identify and target vulnerable players, particularly those showing signs of addiction. Casino corporations wield significant political influence through aggressive lobbying efforts and campaign contributions. They fight against regulations that would require more stringent financial reporting or addiction prevention measures. Their economic impact on local communities makes politicians reluctant to impose stricter controls, creating a permissive environment where questionable practices continue unchecked. The global reach of major casino operators has exported these problems internationally. In Macau, Singapore, and other Asian gambling hubs, VIP rooms operate with even less oversight than their Western counterparts. These venues have become crucial nodes in international money laundering networks, particularly for corrupt officials and business figures from China and other Asian nations seeking to move money offshore. The casino industry's transformation from mob-run gambling dens to corporate entertainment complexes hasn't eliminated its role in financial crime. It's simply made it more sophisticated. Today's casinos operate as part of a global financial system where dirty money flows through legitimate channels hidden behind a veneer of entertainment and luxury. The house always wins, but not just at the gaming tables. The real profits come from providing a sanitized pathway for illicit wealth to enter the legitimate economy. Chapter 5. Politically Funded Corruption Systems. Money and politics have always been intertwined, but the modern era has given rise to increasingly sophisticated systems of legalized corruption. What was once conducted through brown paper bags of cash has evolved into complex networks of political action committees, dark money organizations, and influence peddling schemes that blur the lines between legitimate campaign finance and outright bribery. At the heart of this system lies the concept of campaign finance, which has been transformed by landmark court decisions like Citizens United. These rulings effectively declared that money equals speech, opening floodgates for unlimited corporate spending in politics. Wealthy people and corporations can now funnel millions into super PACs that operate with minimal transparency while maintaining a thin veneer of separation from the candidates they support. The pay-to-play mechanism operates with ruthless efficiency. Corporate donors contribute generously to political campaigns, often through multiple channels to obscure the total amount. Once their preferred candidates take office, these donors receive favorable legislation, lucrative government contracts, or regulatory decisions that benefit their business interests. The return on investment can be astronomical. A few million in campaign contributions might yield billions in government contracts or tax breaks. This system has spawned an entire industry of professional influence peddlers. Lobbyists, many of whom are former government officials themselves, leverage their connections to shape policy and secure advantages for their clients. The revolving door between public service and private industry ensures that those who play by the rules of this system are richly rewarded, while those who challenge it find themselves frozen out of opportunity. The corruption extends beyond domestic borders through a web of international influence operations. Foreign governments and business interests employ sophisticated strategies to curry favor with American politicians, often using U.S.-based proxies to circumvent restrictions on foreign political contributions. These arrangements can result in diplomatic pressure being applied for private gain, trade policies being manipulated to benefit specific industries, or national security decisions being influenced by financial interests. Government contracting serves as another vital component of politically ranked corruption. Companies that make substantial political contributions often receive outsized government contracts, sometimes with limited competition or oversight. These contracts may be padded with unnecessary expenses, subcontracted to politically connected firms, or renewed automatically despite poor performance. The taxpayers foot the bill, while corporate profits soar. The system's genius lies in its complexity and apparent legitimacy. Every transaction can be justified through carefully crafted legal frameworks. Campaign contributions are classified as protected speech, lobbying is deemed essential to democratic representation, and government contracts are awarded through processes that appear competitive on paper. Yet the end result is a massive transfer of wealth and power to those who can afford to pay for political influence. Technology has only made these systems more sophisticated. Digital payment systems, cryptocurrency, and complex financial instruments provide new ways to move money while obscuring its origins and destinations. Social media and data analytics allow for precise targeting of political messages, making influence campaigns more effective and harder to track. Perhaps most insidiously, this system creates a self-perpetuating cycle. Those who benefit from it gain more resources to maintain their influence, while reforms become increasingly difficult to implement. Politicians who might otherwise challenge the status quo find themselves dependent on these same funding mechanisms to remain competitive in expensive electoral contests. The result is a political economy where corruption isn't just present, it's fundamental to how the system operates. Lesson 6. Fake charities funneling personal gain. The world of charitable giving represents humanity's noblest aspirations, yet it harbors some of the most insidious financial deceptions. Every year, billions of dollars flow through charitable organizations, with a disturbing portion disappearing into elaborate schemes designed to enrich people rather than serve the proclaimed causes. These fraudulent operations often begin with compelling storytelling. Consider the case of the Children's Hope Foundation, which raised over $20 million, 0 cents, for supposedly dying children. Investigation revealed that less than 3% reached any charitable cause, while the founders purchased luxury homes and vehicles through a complex web of shell companies. The organization maintained a pristine public image through carefully crafted marketing materials and heart-wrenching advertisements, demonstrating how emotional manipulation serves as a powerful tool for charitable fraud. Innovative expenses provide another avenue for charitable deception. While legitimate organizations typically spend 15 to 20% on overhead, fraudulent charities often hide excessive executive compensation and personal expenses under innocuous-sounding budget categories. One notorious example involved the Veterans Support Network, where tax filings showed 89% of donations going to program services, but deeper examination revealed these services primarily consisted of mass marketing campaigns that generated more donations, creating a self-perpetuating cycle of fundraising that primarily benefited the organization's leadership. Religious organizations present a particularly challenging domain for oversight due to constitutional protections and tax exemptions. Some megachurches and religious foundations operate as de facto businesses, with leadership enjoying extravagant lifestyles while claiming all expenses as ministry. The line between legitimate religious activity and personal enrichment becomes deliberately blurred, with private jets, luxury compounds, and lavish events justified as necessary tools for spreading the faith. Celebrity foundations often exploit their founders' fame to attract donations, while operating with minimal transparency. These organizations frequently leverage star power to host high-profile fundraising galas, where production costs consume most proceeds. Some celebrities use their foundations as image advancement vehicles or tax shelters, with minimal actual charitable impact. One Hollywood actor's foundation spent 6 times more on its annual gala than it distributed to its supposed beneficiaries, while maintaining a public image of philanthropic leadership. Natural disasters and international crises create perfect opportunities for charitable fraud. In the aftermath of major catastrophes, hastily created organizations emerge, capitalizing on public sympathy and urgent needs. These operations often disappear after the initial wave of donations, leaving no trace of actual assistance to affected communities. Following the 2010 Haiti earthquake, authorities identified over 500 fraudulent charities that had diverted millions in relief funds to private accounts. The digital age has transformed charitable fraud, enabling sophisticated online schemes that combine social media manipulation, cryptocurrency donations, and international money movement. Modern fraudsters create compelling websites, maintain active social media presences, and generate fake impact reports to establish legitimacy. They exploit viral marketing techniques and artificial urgency to drive donations before scrutiny can catch up with their claims. Regulatory agencies face significant challenges in policing charitable fraud. The sheer number of registered charities, combined with limited oversight resources and complex international operations, creates ample opportunities for abuse. Many fraudulent organizations operate in regulatory gray areas, technically complying with minimal reporting requirements while concealing their true activities through creative accounting and organizational structure. The most effective fraudulent charities excel at creating an illusion of transparency while obscuring their actual operations. They publish annual reports filled with carefully selected statistics, showcase testimonials from supposed beneficiaries, and maintain relationships with legitimate organizations to borrow credibility. This sophisticated approach to deception makes it increasingly difficult for donors to distinguish between authentic charitable work and elaborate schemes designed to generate private wealth under the guise of public service. Chapter 7. Black Market Arms Deals. The global arms trade operates in a peculiar twilight zone, where legitimate business and illegal trafficking blur into an intricate web of violence, profit, and political power. While major defense contractors publicly trade on stock exchanges and openly negotiate with governments, a vast underground network of brokers, middlemen, and shell companies facilitates the flow of weapons to sanctioned states, terrorist groups, and criminal organizations. These shadow networks often begin with legal weapons manufacturing in developed nations. Factory-fresh firearms, ammunition, and military equipment enter a complex chain of custody designed to obscure their ultimate destination. Arms dealers employ sophisticated methods to circumvent international laws, using a maze of front companies registered in jurisdictions with lax oversight. A single shipment might change ownership multiple times on paper, while physically moving directly from source to buyer, making it nearly impossible to trace responsibility when weapons surface in conflict zones. The mechanics of illegal arms trafficking rely heavily on corruption at multiple levels. Border officials, shipping companies, and even high-ranking military officers can be compromised, creating secure corridors for weapons movement. Documentation is forged with precision, transforming restricted military hardware into agricultural equipment or machine parts on shipping manifests. Banking systems are exploited through layered transactions that disguise payments, often utilizing cryptocurrency and informal value transfer systems. Private military contractors play an increasingly prominent role in this shadow trade. These organizations, offering services ranging from training to direct combat support, frequently operate in legal gray areas. Their need for weapons, combined with their international presence and political connections, makes them ideal conduits for arms trafficking. Some contractors maintain legitimate operations while simultaneously facilitating illegal weapons transfers, using their authorized activities as cover for darker dealings. The human cost of this trade extends far beyond immediate combat casualties. Regions flooded with illegal weapons experience prolonged instability, impeding economic development and humanitarian assistance. Child soldiers armed with trafficked weapons become both victims and perpetrators in endless cycles of violence. Communities are destroyed and generations grow up knowing only conflict, while arms dealers count their profits from safe havens thousands of miles away. State actors often participate in this illicit trade while maintaining plausible deniability. Governments may use black market channels to arm proxy forces or destabilize rival nations without leaving official fingerprints. Weapons might be lost in transit or stolen from military stockpiles, only to resurface in conflict zones aligned with the source country's interests. This government involvement adds layers of complexity to enforcement efforts, as investigators must navigate political sensitivities and international relations. Technology has transformed the arms trade, but not always for the better. 3D printing and small-scale manufacturing have created new challenges for control and tracking. Digital communications enable buyers and sellers to connect anonymously, while electronic banking and cryptocurrency facilitate untraceable payments. Modern weapons themselves incorporate increasingly sophisticated technology, making their proliferation even more dangerous as advanced capabilities spread to non-state actors. The most successful arms traffickers understand that their trade is as much about information as it is about weapons. They cultivate networks of informants who provide intelligence about enforcement operations, political changes, and market opportunities. They maintain relationships with corrupt officials, shipping agents, and financial institutions. This intelligence network, combined with technical expertise and political protection, makes the largest arms trafficking operations virtually untouchable, even when their activities are an open secret within intelligence communities. Chapter 8: Exploitation of Developing Countries. The machinery of wealth extraction from developing nations operates with ruthless efficiency, cloaked in the language of progress and development. Multinational corporations have perfected the art of resource exploitation while maintaining a veneer of economic partnership, creating a modern form of colonialism that's harder to detect but equally devastating. In the mining sector, companies secure rights to mineral-rich lands through complex agreements that often involve bribing local officials and displacing indigenous communities. These deals typically promise jobs and infrastructure development, but the reality usually involves environmental devastation, unsafe working conditions, and minimal economic benefits for local population. The extracted wealth flows primarily to corporate headquarters in developed nations, while host countries are left with toxic waste, contaminated water supplies, and irreparable ecological damage. Agricultural exploitation follows a similar pattern. Large corporations acquire vast tracts of farmland in developing countries, often through questionable land deals that dispossess small farmers. They implement industrial farming methods that deplete soil quality and water resources while producing crops for export rather than local food security. The promised agricultural modernization becomes a tool for resource control, leaving local communities more vulnerable than before. The fashion industry's role in this exploitation is particularly insidious. Major brands outsource production to factories in developing countries where labor laws are weak or poorly enforced. Workers, predominantly women and sometimes children, endure dangerous conditions and poverty wages while producing clothing that generates enormous profits for Western companies. Despite periodic media exposés of factory conditions, the system persists through complex subcontracting arrangements that shield major brands from direct responsibility. Technology companies have created new forms of exploitation. They extract rare earth minerals needed for electronics manufacturing, often from conflict zones where armed groups control the mines. The digital economy's demand for these materials has created modern-day slave labor conditions in many mining operations. Meanwhile, the same companies dump obsolete electronic waste in developing countries, creating toxic hazards for local communities that attempt to salvage valuable components. The pharmaceutical industry exploits developing nations through clinical trials conducted with inadequate oversight and informed consent. New drugs are tested on vulnerable populations who often don't have access to basic health care, let alone the medications being tested on them. When these drugs reach the market, they're frequently priced beyond the reach of the very populations who help test them. Infrastructure projects, often funded through international loans, create debt traps that burden developing nations for generations. Construction contracts go to foreign companies that import their own workers, limiting local employment benefits. The resulting infrastructure frequently serves the needs of extractive industries rather than local communities, while the debt payments drain national treasuries of resources needed for education and healthcare. The banking sector facilitates this exploitation through complex financial arrangements that enable tax avoidance and capital flight. Resources extracted from developing countries are monetized through offshore financial centers, denying host countries tax revenue and economic benefits. International banks also facilitate corruption by providing safe havens for funds stolen by kleptocratic leaders, while imposing strict lending conditions on their nations. This system of exploitation persists because it's protected by a web of legal, financial, and political relationships that span the globe. International trade agreements, investment treaties, and loan conditions often restrict developing countries' ability to implement protective regulations or pursue alternative development paths. Meanwhile, the profits generated by this exploitation fund powerful lobbying efforts to maintain the status quo and prevent meaningful reform. Chapter 9. Money Laundering Through Luxury as Senates. The gleaming facades of high-end real estate, rare art collections, and exclusive yacht clubs often mask a darker reality. They serve as sophisticated vehicles for cleaning dirty money. The luxury asset market has become a preferred playground for those seeking to transform illicit gains into legitimate-appearing wealth, with annual estimates suggesting hundreds of billions of dollars flow through these channels globally. Real estate stands as perhaps the most prevalent luxury asset used for money laundering. Major metropolitan areas like London, New York, and Vancouver have seen vast amounts of suspect money pour into their property markets. Criminal organizations and corrupt officials purchase premium properties through complex networks of shell companies, often paying in cash. These transactions serve multiple purposes. They provide a stable investment, create an appearance of legitimate wealth, and offer opportunities to generate clean rental income or sales proceeds. The art world presents another perfect storm of characteristics that make it attractive for money laundering. The subjective value of artwork, combined with a culture of discretion and limited regulation, creates ideal conditions for hiding illegal funds. A single painting might sell for millions, yet the true buyer and seller can remain anonymous through intermediaries. Art can be easily transported across borders, stored in free ports without scrutiny, and used as collateral for loans that further obscure the money trail. Luxury vehicles, particularly yachts, private jets, and limited edition cars, form another key component of the high-extent money laundering ecosystem. These assets offer mobility, status, and the ability to convert large sums of money in single transactions. A network of specialized brokers, offshore companies, and maritime registries helps facilitate these purchases while maintaining opacity about true ownership. The vessels themselves can serve as mobile bases for conducting further illegal activities or entertaining business associates away from prying eyes. The jewelry and precious gems trade has historically served as a concentrated form of wealth transfer, and modern money launderers continue this tradition. Diamonds and other precious stones offer high value in small, easily transported packages. The industry's traditional resistance to oversight and reliance on personal relationships makes it difficult to track transactions. Criminal organizations exploit these characteristics, using gems to move value across borders or store wealth outside the banking system. What makes luxury asset money laundering particularly insidious is how it distorts legitimate markets and harms ordinary citizens. When criminal money floods into real estate, it drives up housing costs for legitimate buyers. When art prices become detached from artistic merit due to laundering activity, it undermines the authentic art market. The flood of dirty money creates artificial scarcity and inflation across luxury sectors. The professionals who facilitate these transactions, real estate agents, art dealers, yacht brokers, and jewelry merchants, often operate in a gray zone between willful ignorance and active complicity. While some are knowing participants in money laundering schemes, many simply fail to ask questions about the source of funds or the identity of true owners. Industry self-regulation has proven largely ineffective, while government oversight remains fragmented and under-resourced. The integration of luxury asset money laundering with legitimate business creates challenges for law enforcement. Proving criminal intent requires untangling complex ownership structures and establishing links between clean-appearing transactions and underlying illegal activities. Meanwhile, the high-end nature of these markets means that investigative resources are often outmatched by the sophisticated legal and financial advice available to launderers. The luxury asset laundering ecosystem continues to evolve, adopting new technologies and exploiting emerging markets. Digital art and NFTs have created novel opportunities for cleaning dirty money, while new wealth centers in Asia and the Middle East offer fresh venues for questionable transactions. As pressure increases in one sector or jurisdiction, launderers simply shift to other assets or locations, maintaining the flow of illicit wealth into the legitimate economy. Chapter 10. Hidden Fields in Financial Services. The financial services industry operates on a deceptively simple premise: helping people manage, grow, and protect their money. Yet beneath this noble mission lies a complex web of hidden fees, obscure charges, and predatory practices that systematically extract wealth from unsuspecting customers. These hidden costs represent one of the most sophisticated forms of legalized wealth extraction in modern business. Banks have mastered the art of fee generation through seemingly innocuous service charges. Overdraft fees, which disproportionately affect lower-income customers, generate billions in annual revenue. What many don't realize is that banks intentionally process transactions from highest to lowest amounts, maximizing the number of overdraft charges they can impose. A single day's worth of small purchases can trigger multiple $35.00 fees, turning a few coffee runs into hundreds of dollars in penalties. Investment firms employ equally subtle tactics through expense ratios, load fees, and management charges that slowly erode investment returns over time. A mere 1% difference in fees can reduce a retirement portfolio by hundreds of thousands of dollars over decades. Many financial advisors deliberately steer clients toward higher fee products that generate greater commissions, rather than recommending more cost-effective options that would better serve their clients' interests. Credit card companies have elevated hidden fee structures to an art form. Beyond obvious interest charges, they profit from foreign transaction fees, balance transfer fees, cash advance charges, and late payment penalties. The terms governing these fees are buried in deliberately complex agreements that few customers fully understand. Even annual fee cards often come loaded with other less visible charges that more than make up for the apparent savings. The mortgage industry presents another layer of opacity through origination fees, private mortgage insurance, and various closing costs. Lenders frequently present these charges in ways that obscure their true impact on the total cost of home ownership. Some mortgage companies deliberately target vulnerable borrowers with products that appear affordable on the surface, but contain hidden adjustable rates or balloon payments that can lead to financial disaster. Insurance companies contribute to this ecosystem through complex premium structures and coverage exclusions. Many policies contain carefully worded clauses that allow companies to deny claims while continuing to collect premiums. The industry's actuarial calculations are designed to ensure profitability while maintaining just enough claim payments to avoid regulatory scrutiny. Payment processing companies extract their share through interchange fees that merchants must pay on every transaction. These fees are ultimately passed on to consumers through higher prices, creating a hidden tax on all purchases. The digital payment revolution, rather than reducing these costs, has often added new layers of fees through convenience charges and processing surcharges. Investment banks generate substantial revenue through market making and order flow payments, practices that few retail investors understand. While these institutions claim to provide market liquidity, they often engage in sophisticated forms of front-running and arbitrage that systematically disadvantage ordinary investors. The complexity of these operations makes it nearly impossible for regulators to distinguish between legitimate market-making and manipulative practices. The rise of financial technology companies has introduced new variations on traditional fee structures. Mobile payment apps, digital lending platforms, and robo-advisors often market themselves as low-cost alternatives while building their own elaborate fee ecosystems. These companies leverage behavioral psychology and user interface design to normalize continuous small charges that accumulate into significant revenue streams. Behind these various fee structures lies a fundamental truth. The financial services industry has evolved to extract maximum value while maintaining the appearance of providing essential services. The system's complexity serves as a form of camouflage, making it difficult for consumers to understand the true cost of financial products and services. This opacity represents a form of structural exploitation that continues to transfer wealth from the many to the few, all while operating entirely within the bounds of existing law. Chapter 11. Tech monopolies extracting data. In the digital age, the most valuable currency isn't dollars or gold, it's data. Tech giants have built empires not just on providing services, but on harvesting, analyzing, and monetizing the intimate details of billions of users' lives. These companies present themselves as innovators, making the world more connected. But beneath this noble facade lies a sophisticated system of surveillance capitalism. The business model is deceptively simple. Offer free services that people come to depend on, then collect unprecedented amounts of personal information about their behaviors, preferences, relationships, and daily routines. This data is then packaged, analyzed, and sold to advertisers, researchers, and other entities willing to pay premium prices for deep insights into human. What users don't see is how their personal information becomes a commodity, traded and exploited without their meaningful consent or fair compensation. These tech monopolies have created an ecosystem where they don't just dominate their markets, they control the infrastructure of modern life. Email services, search engines, social networks, and mobile operating systems form a web of interdependent products designed to keep users locked within their ecosystem. The more services users adopt, the more comprehensive the data collection becomes, creating detailed digital profiles that track everything from location patterns to shopping habits to emotional states. The exploitation runs deeper than many realize. These companies employ sophisticated psychological manipulation techniques to maximize user engagement and data collection. Push notifications, infinite scrolls, and algorithmically curated content feeds are carefully engineered to trigger dopamine responses and create addictive behavior patterns. The longer users stay engaged, the more data can be extracted and the more advertising can be served. The concentration of power in these tech monopolies has reached dangerous levels. They can influence elections, shape public discourse, crush competitive innovation, and effectively act as unelected arbiters of information access for billions of people. Their algorithms determine what news we see, which businesses succeed or fail on their platforms, and how our social connections are formed and maintained. When companies achieve this level of control, they can operate with relative impunity, knowing that users have few viable alternatives. Privacy policies and terms of service agreements serve as legal cover for these practices, but they're designed to be impenetrable to average users. Hidden within thousands of words of legal jargon are broad permissions for data collection, sharing, and monetization. Even when users attempt to protect their privacy through settings and controls, their data often continues to be collected through shadow profiles, third-party tracking, and device frameworks. The real cost of this system extends beyond the individual privacy concerns. These companies have created a surveillance infrastructure that can be co-opted by government agencies, accessed by malicious actors, or used to manipulate public opinion at scale. The concentration of so much sensitive information in the hands of a few corporations represents an unprecedented risk to personal freedom and democratic society. The business model has proven so profitable that these tech giants are expanding into new territories: healthcare data, financial services, education, and smart home technology. Each new venture represents another opportunity to collect more intimate data and exert greater control over daily life. As these companies continue to grow and consolidate power, their ability to extract and exploit personal information grows exponentially. When challenged about these practices, tech monopolies often point to their innovation and the value they provide to users. But this defense obscures the fundamental imbalance in their business model. Users aren't customers, they're the product. The real customers are the advertisers and other entities paying for access to the vast troves of personal data these companies have accumulated. The free services we've come to rely on come at a cost far greater than most users understand or would willingly pay if given a clear choice. Chapter 12. Offshore Tax Havens Hiding Billions. The pristine beaches and crystal-clear waters of the Cayman Islands mask a darker reality, one where trillions of dollars flow through elaborate networks of shell companies and numbered accounts. Offshore tax havens represent perhaps the most sophisticated and widely accepted form of financial manipulation in the modern world, operating in plain sight while sheltering vast fortunes from taxation and scrutiny. These jurisdictions, from the British Islands to Luxembourg, Panama to Singapore, have crafted their entire economies around financial secrecy and favorable tax laws. They compete aggressively to attract wealthy people and multinational corporations, offering zero or nominal tax rates, strict banking privacy, and minimal reporting requirements. The result is a shadow financial system that enables tax avoidance on an industrial scale. The mechanics of offshore havens rely on layers of complexity and legal fiction. A typical structure might involve multiple shell companies across different jurisdictions, with ownership obscured through nominee directors and bearer shares. Profits are shifted between entities through transfer pricing and intellectual property payments, eventually landing in zero-tax jurisdictions where they can accumulate untouched by domestic tax authorities. Major corporations have elevated tax haven usage to an art form. Tech giants route their international revenues through Irish subsidiaries, then shuffle the profits to Caribbean holding companies. Pharmaceutical companies transfer patent rights to letterbox companies in Luxembourg. Retail behemoths structure their operations through a web of Dutch and Swiss entities. While technically legal in most cases, these aggressive tax avoidance strategies deprive governments of hundreds of billions in revenue annually. The human cost of tax havens extends far beyond lost government revenue. When corporations and wealthy people avoid taxes, the burden falls more heavily on middle and working-class taxpayers. Public services suffer from underfunding, infrastructure crumbles, and inequality deepens. Developing nations are particularly hard hit, losing essential tax revenue needed for basic services and development. The offshore system also enables corruption and criminal activity to flourish. Kleptocrats use tax havens to hide stolen public funds, drug cartels launder their profits, and sanctions busters obscure illegal trades. The same secrecy that attracts legitimate tax avoidance also draws those seeking to hide illicit wealth. The two streams of money, legal and illegal, mix freely in offshore accounts, making it nearly impossible to separate them. Recent leaks like the Panama Papers and Paradise Papers have shed light on these shadowy practices, revealing how politicians, celebrities, and business leaders exploit offshore structures. Yet despite public outrage and promises of reform, the fundamental system remains largely intact. The offshore industry has proven remarkably adaptable, shifting to new jurisdictions and developing novel structures to maintain secrecy. Meaningful reform would require unprecedented international cooperation to eliminate regulatory gaps and force transparency. However, powerful interests, including major banks, law firms, and accounting companies that profit from offshore services, lobby aggressively against change. Many governments themselves maintain overseas territories that serve as tax havens, creating conflicts of interest in enforcement. The ultimate tragedy of offshore tax havens is how they have normalized industrial-scale tax avoidance as an acceptable business practice. Corporate executives now view aggressive offshore planning as a fiduciary duty to shareholders. Wealthy people consider it prudent financial management. This moral flexibility around tax obligations threatens the basic social contract, as those with the most resources increasingly opt out of contributing their fair share to the societies that enable their success.